Well, 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 here we are again. Hope you guys have had a great week. It's time for another Bible ABC lesson, and we're up to the letter Q. So, before I give you the surprise of what we're going to talk about today with Q, we got to roll through that alphabet. Here we go. All right, so we started off with A for Aaron, then it was B for Bible. C was for Christ, D was for David. E was for eyes, F was for 40, G was for Galilee, because there's a Sea of Galilee. Next line, H was for Hannah. I was for idols. I forgot what it was. I had to look. I was for idols. J was for Joseph. K was for kindness. We talked about the Good Samaritan. L was for lepers, the 10 lepers. M was for Mark. N was for Nineveh. And then we come down here to the next line. O is for olives. I haven't written olives there yet. Oh, Jade, get it together. And then last week we did P for prayer. And if you guys remember, we talked about how you can use your hand as a reminder when you pray, kind of what to pray for. And so just to recap that real quick, since that was our latest lesson until today. Praying for those who are closest to you, family members. Praying for those who point the way, preachers, teachers. Praying for those who stand tall in the community. So leaders, world leaders, local leaders, things like that. Praying for those who aren't feeling well, who are sick, and then praying for ourselves there at the very end. So doing that and using your hand to help you can kind of structure your prayer in a way so that you kind of say all the things you want to say and don't leave anyone out. So brings us up to Q. And I told you guys that Q is extra special because Q is one of my most favorite people in the Bible. And I'm so excited to share her with you. So now that I've given you a couple clues, it's Q, it's a her. Any guesses as who it might be? It's going to be Queen. Q for Queen. Queen Esther. I could have done her on E, but then what would we have done for Q? So here she comes. So Esther is an Old Testament book, so, Old Testament and New Testament, so Esther's in our Old Testament, and Esther is, she's the title of the book, right, and she's also the main character in it, but Esther and Ruth are the only two are the only two books in the Bible that are named after women, so we're going to tackle Q for Queen Esther today, so I'm excited to share this with you. This will be a lot of fun. So just to kind of give you a quick perspective of where we're at in history. So, of course, we have the Jews, which are God's chosen people. Now, the Jews got captured a lot. And so they were captured by the Babylonians. But then the Babylonians were captured by the Persians. So the Babylonians captured and then captured the captured. Following me on this? Now, so you can kind of see where we are at. So the king of Persia is a guy named King Xerxes. Now, King Xerxes wasn't the best guy here in the beginning of our story. He had a wife named Vashti, and one day he was holding like a big royal banquet, and he had all his friends there, and he had a little too much to eat, a little too much to drink, and he called for Vashti to come in because she was really pretty, and he kind of wanted to show her off to all of his friends. So, again, not the best guy here in the beginning. But when he called her in, she refused to come, and so he was really embarrassed, and he was like, well, I can't have my own wife disobeying me. So he got rid of her. And so this is where we come to in our story, kind of where Esther comes on the scene. So he's looking for a new lady, looking for a queen. And so he invites all the single ladies that are in the kingdom to come in. So this is going to be, again, going back to our first picture, this is going to be a mixture of Jewish women, of Babylonian women, and of Persian women. So they all come in, and the one who catches his attention, the one that he can't live without, is going to be Esther. Now, quick background on Esther. She is a Jew, so she's of the Jewish faith. She's kind of in the lowest social class in the kingdom. And her parents had passed away, and so she was raised by her uncle. And her uncle's a really cool guy. His name is Mordecai. And later on in our story, a story about Esther, or later on in his life, after Esther becomes, this is a lot of information, Esther becomes queen, he overhears, he's sitting at a gate and he overhears a plot of these two guys talking that they're going to kill the king. So he gets word to Esther about this plot. Esther tells the king, and thus they foil the plot. The king puts those guys in jail or kills them, he gets rid of them, and his life is spared. So Mordecai actually saves the king's life, which is really cool. So Esther is chosen. She gets to go live in the palace. So this is a totally different world for her, to go from kind of like a lower social class to be living in the palace. And so she's headed to the kingdom. Now, every story has to have a villain. And the villain in our story, the bad guy, is going to be a guy named Haman. Now, he was second in command, so if you picture King Xerxes was number one, Haman's right under him. And Haman loved to be loved. So when he walked around the city, he wanted everybody to bow to him. And most people did. But someone who didn't bow to him was going to be Mordecai. And so this really angered him. And Mordecai had a valid reason for not bowing, because he worshiped God and loved God. And so there was no reason to bow or worship another person or an idol. So he refused to do it. And this made Haman so mad. How dare this guy not bow to him? Doesn't he know that he's under captivity? Like, what is he even thinking? And so what Haman decides to do is to put together a decree. And the decree states that not only are they going to, they being the Persians, they're going to destroy Mordecai, but they're also going to kill all of the Jews that are there. So Haman is taking this really personal, and he's going to kill out an entire throng of people. This is a lot of people, right? So he gets the king to sign this decree, and now this decree is kind of sitting there, and it's the law. So this is the part in our story where we're kind of like, ooh, this isn't looking so good. Like, we were kind of happy when Esther, went from kind of living in the town to living in the palace. That was really good. That was moving on up. But now the Jews are in trouble. So this is not good. Something needs to happen. And so here's what happens. Mordecai gets word to Esther about this decree and about what's going to happen to the Jewish people, to her friends, to her family. And Esther's a little nervous because Mordecai's suggestion is that she go to the king and tell him not to do this, not to kill the Jews, and about this kind of secret decree that Haman put together, not really realizing who in the kingdom was of the Jewish faith, right? And so Esther's a little bit nervous because she is the queen, so she does have like some authority, but really not. At this time, it was pretty much the king who controlled everything. And if she were to request a meeting with the king without him kind of calling her in first, she could lose her life. I mean, right before her was Vashti, and Vashti got dismissed because she didn't come when he called. So Esther's kind of weighing this like, well, I mean, I could go to him, but it's going to be risking my own life. And then Mordecai tells her something. And this is one of my favorite kind of sections of verses in the Bible, because it is so pretty. And let me find it real quick. I had it pulled up and then I moved it. But again, just setting the scene, Mordecai's telling Esther, you got to go to bat for myself, for your family, and for all the Jews, that are here under captivity. And here's what Mordecai tells her. And this is in Esther chapter 4, verse 12. 12 and then 13. So he says, do not think that because you are in the king's house that you alone of all the Jews will escape. So he's kind of telling her, you're going to go too, right? If the Jews are going, you're going with us. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And then here it comes. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. Isn't that beautiful? So he's saying, we might think that, yeah, Esther's pretty and that kind of got her in the door, but it's actually God that got her in the door because he knew that this was going to happen and he needed to have someone in place who was going to turn the arm of the king in order to save the Jews, in order to save God's people and keep them together. And so Mordecai's kind of giving her a reminder, like maybe the whole thing about Vashti being sent off, the Persians being in captivity and this guy thinking that you're really pretty, maybe all that was coming together because this is what you're meant to do. You are meant to save the Jewish people in this town. This is your job. This is your moment. That's a lot for Esther, right? So this now it's even bigger. It's so much more, right? So this is where Esther really takes on and becomes a person of courage, right? So she has a big job in front of her. And it could be, right, that she would turn to Mordecai and say, I'm not doing this. I'm going to hang out in the palace. Whatever happens to you guys happens to you. I'll figure out something for myself. But she doesn't. She gets in there and she comes up with a plan. She risks herself, her life. But this is what courage is, right? It's doing the thing that's right, even though you might be a little scared, even though you might not know what the outcome is. But Esther takes it on and she comes up with a plan. So let's see what happens. Let's see if she pulls this off. So what she decides to do is, before we get back to the drawings, she decides to have a banquet. And she invites the king and she invites Haman, right? So Haman doesn't know who she is, right? She doesn't know that she's in cahoots with Mordecai. So she has a banquet and the king says, what is it that you want? Let me know. And she says, you know what? Let me actually have a banquet tomorrow night, and I'll tell you what it is that I want. And the king was like, okay. So him and Haman got to enjoy a banquet made by Esther, and then the promise of one the next night. So then here's where the drawing picks up. So that night, the king was laying in his bed, and he couldn't sleep, so he's kind of tossing and turning, and so he asked one of his servants to come in and read him kind of the royal synopsis, or the royal different royal things that had happened. So you can imagine it's pretty boring, so he's thinking maybe this will put me to sleep. And so as the servant is reading, he gets to the part about the time that Mordecai saved the king's life, and the king kind of perks up a little bit and thinks like, oh, that's amazing, I totally forgot about Mordecai. What did we do to reward him? And the servant is like, we didn't do anything. He saved your life, and that was it. You lived, and here we are now. Okay, so now the king is thinking. So the next day, the king talks to Haman, right? So King Xerxes is first in command, Haman is second. And the king asked Haman, he's like, if I was going to reward somebody, if I was going to really let someone know how much I cared about them, what would I do? And Haman, thinking he's talking about him, Haman's like, oh, well, you would give him a robe and you'd let him go through town on a horse so, everybody would know what a prominent person he is. And the king is like, yes, that's a great idea. I want you to do that for Mordecai. And Haman's like, what? Are you kidding me? I hate that guy. He didn't even bow to me. Like, oh, okay. So he kind of like, yeah, king, whatever. And Haman goes off, and he actually starts building what are called gallows. And gallows are a mechanism it's used to hang people, it's used to kill people. So he builds those because he's thinking, I got to get rid of Mordecai so that I don't have to be the one who parades him through town as this great guy because he didn't bow to me. It's not happening. So then, picking back up with our drawing, that night, Esther has her second banquet with both Haman and the king. And again, the king asks her, what is it that you want, Esther? He said, I'll give you anything you ask up into half of my kingdom. And the Bible tells us that he loved Esther. So at this point, she is more than just a pretty face to him. Someone that he actually loves. And he's like, anything you want, I'll give it to you. And she says, well, I want you to save my life in the lives of my people, for I am a Jew, because he didn't know she was a Jew up until now, because I am a Jew, and there's a decree out right now that says that we should all be killed, and I can't let that happen. And so the king is upset. He's like, what in the world? Who in the world would put out a decree against my queen, my wife, and her people? Like, who would do such a thing? And then you kind of see Esther's hand go up. She's like, oh, I'll tell you who did it. He's sitting right there. And it was Haman. Oh, boo, hiss. So the king is like, get out of here. You are in so much trouble. You are, lack of a better term, you were plotting against the queen. We can't let that happen. And so the gallows that Haman had put together to hang Mordecai on were actually the ones that he was hung on himself. So he was killed for his part in all of this. And you can see here at the end, Esther saves the Jewish people there. So everybody cheered, everybody was really happy, and she continued to kind of grow in the kingdom. And also Mordecai got a prominent place in the king's service as well. So by Esther kind of stepping out on her courage and doing things that were a little uncomfortable, she ended up saving the day for her and her people, which is pretty amazing. So, that's the story of Esther. I don't know if this is the first time that you've heard it or if you've heard it before, but hopefully if you have heard it before, maybe you heard something new that can kind of add to what you already know about Esther. But, of course, I like to always talk about takeaways, so let's talk about those really quick. So I think it's important that we talk about how Esther had courage no matter what. So when you think back to the beginning when King Xerxes was selecting his wives, he picked her because she had a pretty face, right? She didn't get a say-so. She didn't get to say, no, thank you. I already like somebody else in my neighborhood. It was the king, so she had to do what he said. And so sometimes that can be like a little sad because we think, well, she didn't get a choice. I mean, yeah, she got to live in the palace, but then at the same time, did she really want to? So you can kind of go back and forth with that. The thing, though, is that this happened not only to women, but it also happened to men as well. We know that in the story of Daniel, Daniel and his friends were picked up by the king and made to live in the palace, and because the king wanted the best of the best, right? So this was just something that happened to the Jewish people during captivity, is that the best of the best were selected and given different duties. But it is important to know that even though Esther didn't get a choice in that part of it, she still was able to move the story of God forward and move the Jewish people forward, even though she herself was kind of under captivity, maybe not in the best situation herself. So even though she was in a place where she didn't have a lot of control, she still maintained the control that she did have and still maintained her courage and did with it what she could, depending on what her circumstance was. So another thing I wanted to talk about is the fact that in this story, it helps remind us that bad guys don't win. So when we think back to Haman and him getting so upset that Mordecai wasn't bowing to him, Mordecai could have taken it out. He could have set his house on fire. He could have, tripped him in the street. He could have done anything. He could have done so many different things to personally hurt Haman. But he did, right? And so that's something that's really important for us to remember, is that the Bible tells us that vengeance, so getting even with someone, is God's. It's not our place to do that, right? And what we might feel like we want to do in the short term, like we might want to talk bad about somebody. We might want to, if we're playing a sport, we might want to push somebody a little bit harder, right? We might want to be mean to people. All those different things. God doesn't want us to carry that around because God can handle it. And of course, as we see in our story, Haman didn't win, even though he tried really hard. He even, built the gallows. Like, we were really closing in on what's going to happen to Mordecai and the Jewish people. God still had a plan, and God took care of it. And that's important to remember, is that God doesn't want us to hold those feelings of anger and hold those feelings of revenge, because they can keep us from holding feelings of love for God, because you can't really hold both. And so the best thing that we can do when someone is mean to us, the way that Haman was mean to Mordecai, is to let it go, right? To give it up to God, to pray about it, and to say, God, I'm really upset with this person, and I can't stop thinking bad thoughts about them. Please help me. Please clear my mind, and please help me surrender to you. And also, too, Mordecai was pretty smart, because he knew that he could perhaps get back at Haman, but he was going to do it through a way that didn't involve him sinning, right? He was able to go through Esther, who went to the king, and then, of course, the king ultimately handled it. But, of course, the king wouldn't have had that power unless God had given it to him and put him in that position, in that lineage to be king, right? And then the last thing is that everyone has a role in God's kingdom. And so, again, Esther was chosen to be queen because she was very beautiful, but she was so much more than just a pretty face. And that beautiful verse that I shared with you guys that I love so much, that maybe the whole reason that she was put in to be queen was that she had this bigger job to do. And that's true for you guys as well. God has plans for every single one of us, things that he has designed just for us to do. And it's so important that even if we might feel a little scared, even if the task might be a little big, we still need to go through it because we know that we can step out on faith and we know that God is on the other side. And so it's so important to always be looking out for those opportunities to serve God with our gifts the way that Esther was able to serve, not only through her beauty, but also through her courage. And she was able to do it regardless of her circumstances, right? She was able to serve God and, again, to move the story of the Jews forward, which, again, is how we get Jesus. So big deal. Really big deal. So hope you guys enjoyed this story of Esther. I love looking and rereading the book and of Esther, and I, of course, love to reread those verses that I shared with you because I feel like not only were they important for Mordecai to get across to Esther, but I think they're really important for us to remember too, as a way for God to speak to us through those verses as well. So that's our lesson for today. We're almost done. I just want to share your craft with you. So the craft is going to be finger puppets. Heyo. So you can color these guys, decorate them. You got 5 friends here. We got Queen Vashti, there in the beginning. Queen Esther, Haman, King Xerxes, which this has his other name on here. It looks like Ahasuerus. I'm sure I said that correctly. And then, of course, Mordecai. So you have all your characters, and then you can cut them out and then tape these little parts, wrap them around your finger, and you can act out the story of Esther, which will be a lot of fun. And you can give them all funny voices and things like that. But I hope you enjoyed the lesson of Esther, and I hope you think about what your role is in the kingdom of God and what God will put you in place to do and has put you in place to do with the gifts that you have and the opportunities that you are given. So, because it's all for Him anyways, right? But have a wonderful week. Enjoy the sunshine. Be sure to drink lots of water. And I'll see you next week. So PQR. R is next week. I mean, we could do Ruth. We could do back-to-back ladies. I don't know. We'll figure it out. I think I kind of want to do a phrase. I don't know. We'll see. But have a wonderful week, and I will see you very soon. Bye, guys.